Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make a really cute, playful, I guess, mini dress for summer because I got these 4 beautiful like kind of brocade, jacquard and whatnot fabrics right here that I want to incorporate into one dress. So they're all very nice by themselves, but I figured putting them all together in this kind of grid pattern that I have in mind, I think this will look really cool. So I made a sketch which looks like this. I also put some swatches right there, and obviously the colors don't really match, but you know, just so that I have somewhat of a reference that I can refer to once cutting everything out, because that's gonna be... So I already made a mock-up and fitted the dress, as you can see in this video that I took of it. I just had to change a few things, like under the bust I had to take out a little dart because the straps that I am going to do for the back lacing kind of made the side seam a bit wavy. And I was thinking whether I should do elastic straps for the back or if I should do the non-elastic ones that I have in my tryout. That's something I think I'm gonna decide once it's time for that. I think I also want to put it on the dress form and see how it looks like with the elastic straps, because obviously that's way more comfortable to get in as you don't have to lace anything up. But also I think it's more prone to ripping. I don't know though, and then we wouldn't need the loops. We could just sew it into the side seams. Obviously we can still do an elastic lace up in the back, probably will work as well, but you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. You could just sew it into the side seam, but that's a thing that we have to think about once it's time. So initially, since I only have like 1.5 days to sew this, I haven't even cut out the fabric yet or put interfacing on it, and the pattern is a bit more out there because of the 4 fabrics that I'm gonna do in the checkered pattern that is random. Therefore, initially I was thinking to do like a very cute, unlined, super easy summer dress, which probably is not gonna happen now because I made facings and linings and stuff like that, so this is gonna be a whole thing again, which is totally fine because I'd rather do something that takes a little longer that fits in the end than something that is just, you know, one layer but then doesn't really fit perfectly. So I opted to go with facings and linings and interfacing the whole thing just to get like the best result possible. Obviously, if you don't want to do that, you can see how the dress in my mock-up fabric looks in a cotton fabric. If you want to do that kind of thing, you can just leave out the facing and the lining and do another finishing of the raw seams. You can totally do that. It will work as well, but obviously it's gonna be a little more flimsy and a little bit more also summery and like breathable, I guess. So you do whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm gonna do the more advanced, lined, tailored garment, I guess. So let's get started. Okay, now that I've finally cut out all of my pattern pieces, every single pattern piece has like not the same fabric. One side is different to the other is basically what I'm saying. So it took a long time. I put interfacing on every single pattern piece and overlocked every single one as well because these fabrics fray. I also on top of that put interfacing tape with a stay stitch onto the facing pieces that I just cut out of the same fabric on both sides because these will be on the inside anyways. So I just chose the most stable one of these. So basically the first thing that we're going to do is put all of the horizontal seams together. So you're gonna find the piece and then the seam and the number on every single seam. So we're gonna put together the front seam 1, then 2, 3, 4, and then side front seam 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then for the back pieces we only have seam 1 and the waist seam. So the waist piece here, the 2 pieces, is going to have an elastic on the inside. So this is basically an elastic waistband, so that once you actually lace yourself up, or you know, whatever we do, elastic or lace up, whatever, this right here does not gape open, so we're not going to put the waist seam onto the actual pieces yet, but everything with a number. Every horizontal seam with a number. So let's do that. I'm going to start with the front piece and work my way towards the right. So what I will be doing now is to iron all of these seams open and as flat as you can. And after that, we can already put the horizontal ones together. Okay, so now that these pieces are sewn together, you can actually see how they make real dress panels as you know them. We can go ahead and put also the back waistband together. And that just means that we're gonna put the side back waistband together with the back, together with the other back, and together with the other side back. Just make sure that once you put these together, they're not gonna have the exact same colors as the back panels have, so that they are different basically. And since it all fits together, we can go ahead and put the waistband together like this, so just these vertical lines. Let's also iron this open, and we can go ahead and also fold this in half right at the fold line, so that we have an encasing for the elastic in the end. Like this. For the elastic, I'm going to use this black one. I think this is 4 centimeters. I am going to cut from this point right here, so from the raw edge, all the way towards the half of the second back panel. And we're just gonna put this aside now because we're not actually gonna put the elastic in place right now. Instead, we can go ahead and put the panels together so that we have an actual dress, because there's a little bit more that I want to do for it. So we have these intersections right here, and I actually want to stitch it down. So I want to top stitch every single intersection. And I'm gonna do that once the whole dress is in place, especially for the horizontal ones. We can obviously only do the vertical ones once the vertical ones are sewn together. And after that, the horizontal ones are also like one whole line, especially if we get it to fit like very nicely. So that's what we're gonna do first. So let's actually start with the front panel and put right sides of the center front together and close this. I'm actually going to put needles into every single intersection so that this is gonna come out perfectly. And I think I want to try out to actually put it right into the stitching line here. I didn't put it in fabric at all. I just put it into the seam line right here. And I'm gonna do that and put it together with the other one as well. Let's iron this, and then we can see how well this method actually worked, or if it worked at all, if we should not do it again. And as you can see, this looks pretty much perfect. So that's really nice. This method works really well. That's really cool. Let's go ahead and top stitch the vertical lines down. I think I'm gonna do left and right of the piece. Yeah, let's do that. And now we basically continue and repeat this step for all the other panels. We're not going to put the side seams together yet. We're going to leave them open because in one there is going to be the zipper, and in the other, like, we still have to figure out the waistband situation. So we're just going to leave the side seams open for now. And for this here, I am going to cut into the straighter of the two pieces in order to have like the side front panel curve in the way that the front panel curves. Just make sure to mark your bust point so that you know which one goes together with the front piece. And then you just cut towards the stitching line into the seam allowance every 1 or 2 centimeters or so. And then you can see that the actual piece curves really nicely and should fit onto the front piece perfectly. And then we're just going to repeat repeat the method with the intersections, and I'm just gonna put pins into every single seam right here to match them up. And then we can sew the front dividing seam together. By the way, you don't have to separate all of these pieces if you don't want to. You can leave the panels as they are in like one whole piece, so that you have basically like one front piece, one side front piece, back piece, and so on and so forth. I made the pattern that way so that you can just choose between puzzling the pieces together as I am doing, or just using the full panels as they are. You just don't cut the horizontal seams like seam 1, 2, 3 and so on, and just leave the panel as a whole basically. I have a false full print out because the paper was empty, so I can show you here. As you can see, they are all put together, so you can choose whether you want to have a multicolored dress that as I am doing one, or you can also just do a monocolored one, then just leave the panels as they are. And for the cups, we're just gonna use our tailless hem as per usual and just fold it over one of the rounded edges here, and also iron this piece open and redo this on the right side, just to be sure that everything lays neat and tidy like this. Like that, and now we can also put the vertical lines in here. I forgot the slit. Feels like I always forget the slit. So we are just gonna take apart this seam right here. Maybe this is not actually that bad of a solution, to be honest. So we need to like add a bar tack up here, but I think other than that we can work with this pretty much without doing anything else. So maybe this is actually not too bad of a method. I just have to take out all of the thread that still is in here. And I think I'm just gonna add the bar tack, and then that's gonna be the slit. Okay, I have the back panel as well ready, so as you can see everything's put together. So now we can attach the waistband to this whole thing, and I'm just gonna put both of the layers like folded right sides onto the waist seam right here. It's not really a waist seam, it's like a lower waist seam, but just put it on here, match up all of the intersections, make sure that this one that sits right sides on the back panel, that's the one that you're going to be able to see, that this one sits perfectly on the intersection. I mean the other one as well, but that's less important as that's going to sit on the inside. So do that first, and then put the other one on top, and then we're just gonna sew this together as well. Let's iron this. I'm gonna iron the seam allowance down. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the elastic into my tunnel right here, and I'm going to use a safety pin for that. Just be careful to not disturb the position of the seam allowance. It needs to still lay open while you put the elastic inside. Just be wary of that. And once you reach this point so that the elastic ends with the seam allowance here of the waistband, you want to fix that in place like a lot, that it does not move. And we're gonna stitch it and fix it in place as well. Like that, and I'm gonna just stitch into the seam allowance on both sides to fix the elastic in place. And now this looks a little bit distorted. We can just pull on it and it should lay very evenly and smoothly. You can decide now whether you want to add a top stitch through the middle here. I think I'm gonna do that just to flatten this piece a tiny bit. Just be aware that you have to stretch while you sew, otherwise the elastic's not going to be usable anymore. So I'm just going to stretch it like this and stitch down the middle of my waistband. Okay, that's what it looks like. We can go ahead and put front and back pieces together, at least on the right side of the dress. So match up the seams and the intersections, and on top here, this seam right here matches up with the waist seam here, so you want to match up that as well. You're going to find a notch in the side front piece as well where to match it up with your waistband. And for the left side, you're going to find a notch that marks the zipper, which is right here, so you want to match that up. It's a tiny bit below the waist seam, and you want to sew only towards the notch, not any further than that. Let's also iron this. Now we can add the vertical top stitches for the complete side seam, so the right one, as that's finished. But we're not going to do it yet for the one with the zipper, as we're going to have to put it in first. But we can go ahead and add some vertical lines as well. I think I want to wait for the vertical top stitches right here for the first and second seam, because we're going to have a facing along this side here and on top. So I think we're gonna just fuse the facing and the shell together by top stitching seam 2 and seam 1. So let's not do that yet for this, but we can do it for 3 and 4. Okay, it's time to add the zipper. So I left this open on the left side for the zipper, and I'm gonna use like some invisible zipper in this beige kind of color so that it kind of blends in with the whole thing. And the zipper gets attached from the waistband point in the side front right here, which is gonna match up with the upper fold line of the waistband on the back panel, all the way down to where we closed the side seam already. Typically I like to close the side seam, or like the seam below a zipper, after the fact, like after I put the zipper in. I closed it right now already, so I'm not sure if I like that. But anyways, we're gonna roll with it. Both of these methods are totally fine. There are people who like it better with the seam closed, some like it without, so whatever you prefer. I'm just gonna attach the zipper in the usual way. I have my waistband point right here, so I'm gonna match that up with the end of the plastic stopper right here on the top. If I fold this out of the way, you can see where the actual end of the zipper is, so that's what has to match up with the point right here. And then without stretching either the fabric or the zipper band, I'm just gonna pin the zipper down until I reach the zipper notch, or in this case, the seam. And if the zipper is too long, that does not matter at all. Actually, that's what you want. The zipper too short would be problematic. So you're just gonna stitch until you reach the zipper point as far down as you can. And you have to match that up with the seam that you already put in here. So you can see the stitches here. That has to match up with the stitching line right in here underneath the teeth. So make sure to match that. And you can go ahead and stitch from the zipper point up here all the way down until you reach the stitching line. So now I close the zipper, and I'm gonna mark with some horizontal pins the dividing seams right here, because that's what has to get matched up with the other side. And I'm also going to mark the end of the zipper, like right here, because this point has to match up with the upper edge of my waistband. And then, last but not least, the point where the seam starts. So now with these markers, I can go ahead and open the zipper and fold everything wrong sides out. It's just easier to see where everything belongs, basically. I can go ahead and match up the needles with the corresponding notches in the piece, so that I know where exactly they have to sit, and so that I can assure that both sides are gonna get parallel, especially here at the waistband. It's super important to match everything up and to get it as less bulky as you possibly can. So if the fabric kind of shoves towards the side seam because of the elastic, you want to get that out of the way to get the neatest result. Otherwise, you're probably going to have issues with like pulling the zipper up. And now from the side where the teeth are, I can stitch this in place as well. And once that's done, it should look like this, so you should not be able to see the zipper. I'm just gonna press it flat so that here I added a bar tag for like where the zipper ends, that all of that is just gonna sit close and neat and tidy, so that you're not gonna be able to see anything at all. It gapes open like this here because I had to add a tiny bit more space between the teeth and my seam, otherwise you're just not gonna be able to close this, as this is too bulky. So if you ever have the problem that the zipper won't close over like a thicker seam, give it a little bit more fabric, I guess, and don't just stitch right next to the zipper teeth, otherwise it just blocks it. But you can kind of hide it with the iron, so it should be fine. So next up, I want to add the loops to these sides here, and I was thinking what material I should use for the loops. I have this like 5mm thick satin band, which I think color-wise would also look really nice, but I think it's still too thick. Like, I tried it out with my mock-up and I was barely able to even thread the loops that I was doing with this type of satin band. So I think I want to try to fold this in half and make it even more narrow, so that I have like a 2.5mm band, and that I think would be a great thickness for the loops. I am not sure still which type of thread, yarn, whatever I want to use for the lace up, as I was looking into my stash and I don't have that much of like round elastic anymore. I'll see if I can make it work with what I have left, otherwise I'm gonna have to do a non-elastic lace up, which is fine too, but it is more of a hassle to get into, as you have to unlace it every time, or like unloop it every time and rethread. So I'm gonna like try to stitch it this narrow, and this would be the perfect width for the loops. Okay, that worked really well. So for the loops, I think I'm just gonna cut off like 5mm pieces, 5cm pieces of course, so that I have a little bit of room, that I also won't cut these down, otherwise they're just gonna rip out. I did that for my mock-up and it didn't work. And I'm gonna cut off 8 pieces. And these match really well with this fabric, really like that. These will get attached at the points that are marked in the pattern, and I also have notches in here. So I'm just gonna like have a little bit of seam allowance right here, and then I'm gonna sew it like flat onto one side of the notch. And I'll do this kind of turn, and also sew it onto the other side of the notch. So the notch is right in the middle here, and I'll place it below and above this. And I make sure that if I stitch my facing onto this piece, there's still like a little bit of loop visible like this. So it's gonna be really tiny, but I think that'll look really nice. Maybe I'll give a little bit more ribbon into here so that it's a tiny bit bigger, so that I'm not gonna have that many problems while lacing up. I think that's a really nice size, and I'm gonna fix that in place, as I just said, and work my way down, placing the loops every notch that I have. And repeat that on the other side, and then I'm just gonna bar tack them in place. Okay, I took a leap of faith basically and used some elastic thread, more or less, to try on the dress, because the elastic that I have is just not long enough, sadly. That would have been almost perfect, it would have been in black, but you know, the strength, the thickness of the elastic would have been really nice. So I just put it on with a different, way smaller and more flimsy elastic, and this is what it looks like. It kind of works, but it kind of doesn't. So I'm not gonna do the elastic. I have to do a lace up with a non-elastic material, which is fine as well. Like, in the end, it's just gonna look better. As you can see, it doesn't really hold up the shape right here. I mean, we're gonna add a facing that is also like, that also has interfacing on it, which is gonna hold this up a bit better and gives it a bit more strength, but it kind of does not what it's supposed to do, which is like keep this up and these like not folded like this. This is what it looks like in the back. Ignore my bra, obviously you can't wear a bra with this kind of backless dress. And as you can see, like I can go ahead and pull and pull and pull on this thread so much more because it's just not getting tight enough. And I am getting to the point where I feel like I'm gonna rip the thread to get the look that I want. So this is not something that I'm gonna be able to use. So I'm just gonna do a normal lace up, which I think will also look really pretty in this pink color. I'm gonna use the same satin band as I did for the loops, just not folded in half, just as 5mm as they are. And then I just have to tie it in the back. So the shell is now basically done. We're gonna head over to the facing and the lining, which is somewhat straightforward. So I'm gonna walk you through quickly, and then I'm just gonna cut to the finished lining, because basically just sewing vertical seams. So we have the front panel that is like a full panel like this. And then we have the side panels that are cut in half or right here, because we have the facing here as well, which is going to be placed over here. I'm just going to show you one side so that you know. So this is the side front lining, then the upper side front facing that gets sewn on right here. And then we're going to have the lower side front lining right here, and on the back it's the same as for the shell. We have a side back and a back, and what you want to do first is close the side front facing seam. Then you want to close the waist seam so that you have one full side front panel. You can then also close the front dividing seam all the way from like neck to hem, and you're gonna find the front neck facing as well that gets sewn like on the very top part of the full front. So this goes from side seam to side seam, and then you're just gonna put the lining, the back of the lining together, and also leave the zipper on the left side open, just as for the shell. So let's just skip to the lining being finished. Okay, the lining is now completed. As you can see, it has a facing all around the front part, and then it goes into the back lining here as well. We're going to attach the waistband with the elastic onto the lining here. So what we do now is to put the straps onto our shoulders, which is gonna be on the shell. So you're gonna find the placement here at the dividing seam, and then right here on the side, like pretty much at the side seam of the side front panel. We're just gonna add strips right here, and you probably want to have them maybe 70 centimeters long, maybe more, maybe less. You can always shorten them, so maybe you want to give it a bit more room, because we want to be able to tie a bow tie probably here in the front. So you'd rather want to give it more space. And same as with the loops, you want to give this a little bit more seam allowance so that it doesn't rip out. I'm just going to place it right sides onto the front dividing seam here. And right here you want to at least have the strap 1 centimeter inwards, or however much your seam allowance is, otherwise this is not gonna work. So just keep it. You maybe also want to have it like a bit diagonal this way right here, so that once everything is turned right sides out, it's gonna face the correct way. So it's gonna face towards the back and then over your shoulder onto the front. And that should be it for the straps. Now let's take our facing and lining and put it right sides onto our shell and put all of the notches and all of the points together so that we can put lining and facing together. You're gonna find notches in the front facing, front neck facing for the front dividing seam. And right here with the loops, you want to make sure that the loops actually face the inside so that they don't go out, because otherwise you're not going to be able to sew them correctly. You want them all to sit on the inside of this piece. And the facing is a tiny bit smaller than the shell, so ease both pieces together. Like that, let's work our way down. And it's probably the easiest if you shove the shell on the inside of the lining, and you put the lining like right on top here. And we're gonna have to do this in 2 steps basically. So you're gonna find a notch right here that marks the ending point of your waistband here. So you just want to go all the way towards the waist seam like that. And we're going to repeat the same on the other side here, where we can actually open the zipper, and then it's going to be a tiny bit easier because we have a full seam allowance that we can work with. So this seam here has to match up with this seam here, like here. For the zipper band right here, before you sew it down, you want to fold it towards the inside and out of the way, like this, so that once you attach the facing onto it, it keeps it like nicely out of the way. And now we can go ahead and sew from the waist seam all the way over the neckline to the other side of the waist seam. So usually I would say understitch the seam, but there is no way that we can like reach this well. So I'm just gonna flip this right sides out. Before that, let's cut down the seam allowance while making sure to not cut away the straps. So nothing of this kind of material, because otherwise you're just gonna rip it out. You probably need to cut towards the stitching line here in order to flip everything around and in order to continue sewing the skirt onto the waistband. So let's also do that here. And now we can go ahead and flip this whole thing right sides out. You can use your straps here to, and I'll flip the corners right sides out. Should make it pretty easy. I'm gonna try to iron this as I usually do, with the ditch of the seam only visible on the facing side, without understitching the seam. This is a bit harder, but I think I'm gonna add a top stitch anyways to this whole perimeter of the front piece. And I forgot the center. The center strap, the one that I was talking about the whole time. I forgot about it. Okay, we have to, or I have to, hopefully you didn't do it wrong. I have to undo the center here. I'm gonna add probably like 4 meters of satin band. And I'm gonna have it like lay kind of like this. Probably going to pre-stitch this so that it doesn't change much. And I'm not gonna cut the loop here. And this piece here with the loop, I'm gonna just stick right into the opening that I made, and I'm gonna sew it onto this whole piece like this. And now let's continue with the ironing now that that's fixed. Now to finish the waistband here, we're gonna go underneath here between the shell and the lining, and we're gonna grab the back of the lining and the seam allowance of the waistband seam. Now, since I already sewed it down, probably should have not done that. There is only a little bit of seam allowance left, which is fine. We can still attach the lining onto that, no problem. And that means that part of the zipper will be exposed, which is also fine. You can also hand sew this in place if you don't want to machine stitch this. I'm just gonna try to machine stitch it. And right here, it should end right where you attached the facing onto the side seam. And make sure to also match the lining up with the shell and stretch while you sew, and then it should be no problem. So this is obviously not perfect. In an ideal case, you want to have more seam allowance than this itty bitty teeny tiny one. What we have to do still is to fix the seam allowance of this short side here, from here to here, onto the seam allowance of our zipper band. So what we want to do for that is, I don't think that I can even reach that, as this should be like right here, if that makes sense. So I'll have to do that by hand. It doesn't really matter, it's fine. But we can go ahead and do that for the other side. So we're going to close from this point down to the zipper notch. It should meet with the zipper notch in the shell. So we can sew from here to here. And then the other side, we can start by machine from the zipper point up until where we can reach. And then the rest we have to do by hand, because at some point you just simply cannot reach anymore because the waistband is in the way. And I think I can reach up until like a centimeter below. The rest has to be done by hand. So let's close these two. Okay, I ended up top stitching this side down. I don't think it's too visible, it just kind of disappears under the patterns of all of the fabrics. So that was my solution. Obviously you can hand sew it, it probably will look way better. Now the only thing that's left are the two hems, so we're gonna finish those separately. I already ironed up the hem facing, which is 4 centimeters. You're gonna find notches in the seam allowance right here, so you just fold them at those points. I think I like the seamless finish the best, so I'm just gonna hem tape this in place. The lining I will do a little bit different, so I will be folding the lining seam 2 times, 2 centimeters inwards, so it's gonna stop right at where we folded the hem facing. So as I said, I'm just simply gonna fuse the lining and shell together with hem tape at the slit. It's the easiest and fastest option, so you can obviously also sew it. If you don't want to use hem tape or you don't have anything at hand, that's totally up to you. Another thing that I wanted to share was my solution to avoid any wrinkles in the side seam whatsoever. Like, I tried the dress on after I was done and I was so upset that it wrinkled a bunch in the side seam still, so I thought about a solution and came up with boning in the side seams. And since the dress is lined, it's as simple as top stitching boning channels into both side seams from the neckline to about the mid zipper point. That fuses the facing onto the shell as well and gives the whole dress more structure, shape, and you can use it for your boning. I was super happy with the solution, so if you ever have this problem, that's the way to go. So the last thing that I'm actually going to do, I almost forgot about that, I actually already recorded my outro, is to sew the horizontal lines and to fix those in place as well. I think I'm gonna start from the top and work my way down just to make sure that I'm not getting the lining in any weird ways. So I'm just gonna like try to maneuver it into place. But that should be it, so I'm just gonna add the top stitches to here and here, and then the dress is done. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I am super excited to see this dress like laced up and on myself. I hope that it's gonna look really cute how I imagined, and I hope you had fun watching this a bit more experimental kind of dress. Obviously this would be a super cute dress without all of the blocks of fabrics basically, so if you just have a monocolor dress. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, if you haven't already, go ahead and check out my social media and give me a follow there. Links to all of that is also in the description down below. The most direct way to support me and keep videos just like this one coming is to head over to my Etsy store, where you can also find the pattern for this dress as well, so check that out. There are so many patterns on it. All of them have a video tutorial, so if you find something interesting, support my channel and myself that way. A special thank you also to all of my channel members. You can get exclusive benefits when becoming a channel member through the link in the description down below as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!